What if the most dangerous virus in America isn't biological, but intellectual? That's how Senator John Kennedy opens his brutally honest and surprisingly funny book, How to Test Negative for Stupid. He's not talking about germs, and he's talking about ideas. About arrogance, ignorance, and blind loyalty infecting the heart of the U.S. government. It's not a memoir, he insists. It's a behind-the-scenes tour of Washington, a crash course in political absurdity. This opening sets the tone for everything that follows. Kennedy isn't here to play nice. He's here to pull the curtain back on the swamp, the same swamp he wades through every day. From the start, he paints a contrast between what America imagines Washington to be and what it actually is. To the public, D.C. looks like power and purpose, marble columns, mahogany desks, speeches that shape nations. But Kennedy describes it more like a circus with a dress code, filled with good people trapped in bad systems, and even more people who have mastered the art of pretending to work. He jokes about being warned early on to tone it down after one of his interviews. They told me I'd gone too far, he recalls, when I said some in Washington act like they're one of the founding fathers. That's the essence of Kennedy's charm. He says what everyone else is thinking, but is too scared to say out loud. He admits that blunt honesty can be dangerous, politically at least, but he also insists that it's necessary, because in his words, only dead fish go with the flow. That line isn't just funny, it's philosophy. It's his mission statement. Kennedy believes the biggest threat to America isn't the economy, or the media, or even foreign powers. It's a lack of common sense among the people running the show. He writes about Washington's obsession with decorum, the polite smiles that hide incompetence, the meetings that accomplish nothing, the speeches that say everything and mean nothing. The book, he says, is about candor, the weapon Washington fears most. And that's where the story begins, with a man who refuses to whisper the truth, even in a city built on whispers. In this introduction, Kennedy promises readers a guided tour of politics without the filters, a ride through what he calls the swamp, armed only with sharp wit, a thick accent, and an allergy to stupidity. Chapter 1. A Day in the Life of a U.S. Senator. Everyone imagines a senator's life as power meetings and grand speeches. John Kennedy bursts that illusion fast. My day-to-day life, he says, is far less glamorous, was and far more ordinary. He wakes in a small, overpriced D.C. apartment furnished with second-hand pieces and guarded by a 12-foot stuffed alligator named Alphonse. Early Salvation Army, he jokes. From there, he walks to the Capitol, still pausing some mornings to stare at the dome that reminds him why he's there. It represents the endurance of the American experiment, he writes, a place where only the most serious citizens are meant to serve, which explains why I work elsewhere. Inside, the myth of constant action dissolves. Most floor speeches echo through an empty chamber, performed for cameras so staffers can clip them for hometown news. The world's greatest deliberative body, he asks. Sometimes it's more like a high school cafeteria. Between the humor, Kennedy shows his frustration, endless procedures, unread reports, and rules that make little sense, like the one allowing only milk or water on the Senate floor. Reading the rule book, he jokes, is like being run over by a truck twice. Yet his respect for public service never fades. He praises colleagues such as Susan Collins and Jan Shaheen for integrity and intellect, and he values the rare debates that end in laughter instead of grudges. You don't have to be crazy to serve in the Senate, he quips, but it helps. By the end, Kennedy's paradox shines. He loves what the Senate stands for, democracy, dialogue, service, but hates what it's become, a stage where appearance outweighs achievement. It's not corruption that bothers me most, he says. It's complacency. His closing line captures the cure he believes Washington needs most. Honesty isn't a political strategy, it's a duty. Politics, Kennedy insists, doesn't need more brilliance, it needs more backbone. Chapter 2. Home Sweet Home. Every politician claims they'll never forget where they came from, but for Senator John Kennedy, home isn't a slogan, it's survival. After the marble corridors and polite chaos of Washington, he takes us back to Louisiana, a place of grit, humor, and honesty that shaped the man who now calls out nonsense from the Senate floor. Home isn't just a place, he says. It's an identity, a moral compass, and a reminder of what real life looks like. Born in the small town of Zachary, Louisiana, Kennedy grew up where everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew your business. His mother taught school. His father ran a small construction company. By age 11, Kennedy was cleaning job sites under the blazing sun. His father introduced him to the crew and said, "This is my boy, John. He works for all of you now." That moment taught him humility, respect, and one truth he's never forgotten. Life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid. That line, half joke and half warning, became his philosophy. It's not about mocking ignorance. It's about rejecting laziness. He tells stories of youthful blunders, mowing lawns, loading lumber, and accidentally driving a forklift through a warehouse wall. "I wasn't hurt," he laughs, "but the wall was never the same." Each mistake came with a lesson about responsibility. The world, he reflects, is full of smart people who never learned to show up. But home sweet home isn't just childhood memories. It's a love letter to Louisiana itself. Kennedy describes his state with warmth and wit. The Cajuns, the food, the music, the humor that finds laughter even in hard times. If God had created Boudreaux and Marie instead of Adam and Eve, he jokes, they would have eaten the snake instead of the apple. Louisiana, he says, is everything Washington isn't. Imperfect but real. It's a place where people don't care how clever your speech is. They care whether you keep your word. Kennedy and his wife Becky still live in Madisonville, where they helped start a small church. When he's not working, he reads, hunts, and fishes. Louisiana keeps me grounded, sane, and sober, he says. It reminds me who I work for. For Kennedy, Louisiana is more than home. It's a teacher. It taught him that honesty has an accent, that common sense matters more than credentials, and that a man's word is his wealth. You can build a government out of marble and mahogany, he writes, but if you forget the people who built the lumber yards, you'll end up with nothing but speeches. Louisiana isn't perfect, but it's honest. And that's why it's home. Home, Kennedy says simply, keeps me human. Chapter 3. My first job in government. Before John Kennedy ever took the Senate floor, he sat behind a desk in a cramped, paper-stacked cubicle inside the Louisiana state capitol. Young, idealistic, and armed with degrees from Vanderbilt and Oxford, he believed reason could fix anything. I thought I could make government smarter, faster, and fairer, he says. Turns out government is where efficiency goes to die. As legal counsel to Governor Buddy Roemer in the late 1980s, Kennedy faced the hard truth. Logic doesn't drive government. Politics does. Every reform, no matter how small, threatened someone's power, and every good idea came with a hidden enemy. Government isn't run by bad people, he explains. It's run by cautious ones, and caution is where good ideas go to suffocate. He paints a vivid picture of endless memos, pointless meetings, and task forces that formed faster than they ever finished. We were brilliant at forming committees, he jokes, and hopeless at finishing them. One ethics reform meeting still stands out in his memory. Everyone supported transparency until the cameras rolled. It was like watching courage evaporate. Truth and politics walked into the same room, and politics won every time. Kennedy soon discovered bureaucracy's favorite language: polite delay. Words like further study or next session really meant never. You could drown in the Mississippi faster than you could navigate a government flowchart, he quips. But instead of giving up, he found a weapon: honesty. Say what everyone knows but no one dares to say. That became his rule. His bluntness didn't make him popular, but it earned respect. He learned that courage isn't about fearlessness, it's about speaking truth when you're scared to death. From those days came 3 lessons. Honesty beats polish, bureaucracy hates daylight, and taxpayers own every dollar government spends. When an aide once defended waste by saying, "The money's already allocated," Kennedy replied, "So is stupidity, but we still fight it." He left that job not bitter, but wiser. You can't fix what you don't understand, he says, and you can't understand government unless you've seen how slowly it walks. The Oxford idealist had become the Louisiana realist, still hopeful but tougher. Intelligence alone won't save a nation, he reflects. You need courage, moral clarity, and a sense of humor about how crazy it all is. Kennedy sums it up perfectly. Bureaucracy often hides behind good manners. It's like being mugged by a smile. Those early years taught him more than any classroom ever could. That reform is a marathon, not a miracle, and that you can't drain a swamp by joining the Gators. That cubicle was his real education, a baptism by paperwork that forged his lifelong creed. Tell the truth, resist fads, and never forget the people's money isn't yours. Government doesn't need more geniuses, he concludes. It needs a few more adults. Chapter 4. Running. Politics looks easy from the outside. Handshakes, speeches, and smiling photos with babies. But John Kennedy reveals the truth. It's a marathon that tests your patience, your pride, and your faith. He calls campaigning a brutal mix of faith, fatigue, and humility. His first real campaign didn't start with consultants or big budgets. It started with a borrowed pickup truck, homemade yard signs, and a prayer that his shoes would last until the next parish line. Louisiana campaign season, he jokes, is a traveling circus with less popcorn and more sweat. Mornings were spent in diners where waitresses knew his coffee order, afternoons in town halls that smelled of gumbo and optimism. You shake 1,000 hands, he says, answer the same questions 100 times, and still end the day wondering if anyone actually cares. He loved those conversations. The single mom asking about grocery prices, the retired teacher questioning if Washington even reads its own bills. Kennedy listened, laughed, and told stories about the absurdities he'd seen in government. When advisors urged him to polish his accent and rehearse his jokes, he refused. If you fake who you are, he said, voters can smell it from a mile away. That honesty cost him elections, but it bought him respect. Losing taught me humility. Winning taught me gratitude. He remembers election nights that ended in silence. Supporters gone home. TVs announcing someone else's victory. It's like a wedding canceled halfway through, he laughs. Yet instead of bitterness, he found lessons. Failure sandpapers your ego, he writes. And a politician without a little scar tissue can't take the heat when it matters. Campaigning wasn't glamorous. Long drives, cheap meals, forgotten towns. Once, after mixing up parish names mid-speech, an old woman corrected him. Son, you're lost. She was right, he admits. But she still voted for me. That humility, humor, and endurance became his trademarks. For Kennedy, campaigns aren't theater. They're conversations. Politics isn't about who's smartest, he says. It's about who's toughest, and who stays honest when nobody's looking. He learned that people don't want perfect speeches, and they want real ones. He tells the story of a farmer complaining about confusing paperwork. Kennedy replied, because if it were easy, someone in Washington would lose their job. The farmer laughed and voted for him. That's Kennedy's secret. Tell the truth and make it funny enough to remember. He admits campaigning takes a toll. The missed family dinners, the exhaustion that comes from always being on. Every handshake costs energy, he says. Every smile takes practice. But the hardest part isn't exhaustion. It's pretending you're not exhausted. Still, he pressed on. Each diner chat, each handshake was a small act of faith. The best thing about running for office, he says, is that it reminds you who you work for. By the time he finally won, victory didn't feel like triumph, it felt like relief. Campaigning, he reflects, is character development in public. Authenticity, he learned, isn't a tactic, it's endurance. If you run for the wrong reasons, the trail will expose you. If you run for the right ones, the trail will shape you. His final lessons are simple. Listen more than you talk. Never outsource your soul. Keep humor handy, respect defeat, and always pass the diner test. If you can't explain it over breakfast, it's not good policy. Politics isn't a sprint, he concludes. It's a long, dusty march with the people you serve walking beside you. You'll stumble. You'll sweat. But if you keep your word, you'll finish with something worth more than victory. Respect. And with a grin, he adds, you don't need to kiss every baby. Just make sure you can look their parents in the eye. Chapter 5. An education. For John Kennedy, education wasn't just a credential. It was a calling. But as this chapter reveals, his journey through universities and elite institutions taught him something more profound than academics. That knowledge without humility is just arrogance in a cap and gown. Kennedy begins by tracing his path from Louisiana, Tech to Vanderbilt University, and eventually to Oxford. Each stop along the way polished his intellect but also exposed him to the pitfalls of intellectual pride. You can have all the degrees in the world, he says, but without humility and common sense, you're still uneducated. At Louisiana Tech, he was driven by curiosity more than ambition. He read voraciously, debated professors, and soaked up every idea he could find. But even then, he noticed something. Some of the smartest people he met were also the most disconnected from reality. They could define justice but couldn't change a tire. At Vanderbilt, Kennedy refined his skills as a communicator. He learned how to think critically, write clearly, and argue persuasively. But the ivory tower had its own brand of foolishness. Academics who believed that if an idea sounded complicated, it must be profound.
Kennedy didn't buy it.
If your ideas only work in Latin, he jokes, they're probably not worth much in English. Then came Oxford. The centuries-old institution, with its cobblestone paths and candlelit libraries, was the peak of intellectual prestige. Kennedy thrived there, but not because he wanted to sound smarter. He wanted to understand people. He found that some of the brightest minds lacked common sense entirely. They could quote Aristotle, he says, but couldn't balance a checkbook. Oxford gave him degrees, but Louisiana gave him perspective. He never let the Oxford Polish scrub away the plain talk that made him who he was. He recalls one professor criticizing his writing for being too direct. I took it as a compliment, Kennedy says. If my words confuse people, I'm not teaching, I'm showing off. His education was more than formal training. It was an exercise in humility. He spent long nights walking the ancient streets of Oxford thinking about home. He realized that intelligence isn't what separates people. Empathy does. The truly wise don't show off their knowledge, he says. They share it so others can see more clearly. Kennedy's time at Oxford taught him how to think deeply, but his upbringing in Louisiana taught him how to live simply. Intellect means little without integrity, he writes. Wisdom isn't just in books, it's in experience. He connects his academic life to his later political philosophy. That plain talk is more powerful than polished jargon. You can bury the truth under footnotes, he says, but it still knows how to dig itself out. By the end of the chapter, Kennedy's message is unmistakable. Education is supposed to sharpen your mind, not dull your humanity. The real test of intelligence, he concludes, is whether you can explain something complicated to someone who never had your opportunities and make them feel smarter, not smaller. Chapter 6. Sweet Victory. This chapter begins not with celebration but with exhaustion. After years of failed campaigns and lessons learned the hard way, Kennedy finally wins a U.S. Senate seat. He describes election night vividly, the TV flickering, staffers pacing, his wife Becky squeezing his hand as votes trickle in. When the numbers finally confirm his victory, Kennedy doesn't feel euphoria. It wasn't pride, he says. It was gratitude. Gratitude that the people of Louisiana had given me a chance to serve them. He doesn't glorify the win. He dissects it. Every previous loss, he explains, was a training session in humility. Losing builds character faster than winning ever will, he says. He remembers the long road that brought him there, the times he doubted himself, the nights spent writing speeches no one would hear, the constant temptation to give up. By the time he finally walked into the Senate chamber as a newly elected senator, he had learned the most important truth in politics. Power doesn't define you, it reveals you. Power, Kennedy writes, is like whiskey. It doesn't change who you are. It just reveals it. That quote sits at the center of this chapter like a warning. Washington, he says, is a city that tests character more than competence. It tempts newcomers with attention, flattery, and influence, and then watches what they do with it. Kennedy admits he was awestruck that first day, standing under the Capitol dome, seeing his name engraved above an office door. He describes the surreal mix of pride and panic that comes with realizing you now have real responsibility. There are only 100 of these jobs in the country, he says. That's not a prize, and that's a promise. He talks about his first few weeks in office, the flood of phone calls, the rush of reporters, the endless congratulations that quickly fade into the reality of governing. Washington can seduce you, he says. It whispers that fame is the same as purpose. But they're not even cousins. Kennedy recalls a piece of advice from a senior senator. Remember, every man who walks in here thinks he's the smartest one in the room. Most of us aren't even close. That humility, he says, is the antidote to arrogance and the real victory. He doesn't shy away from the emotional side of his journey. He describes calling his father's old friends that night. The construction workers, the teachers, the small-town voters who believed in him long before the headlines did. I didn't win alone, he says. Louisiana carried me here. Kennedy's first victory taught him that success in politics should never be treated as an arrival. It's the beginning of another test. The higher you rise, he says, the easier it is to forget who's holding the ladder. He concludes this chapter with a moment of reflection, sitting in his Senate office late at night, looking out over Washington's lights. It struck me, he says, that every light out there represents someone who trusted me not to waste this chance. For Kennedy, sweet victory isn't about triumph. It's about responsibility. Power, he writes, isn't something you hold. It's something you're supposed to carry for others. He closes with a single line that could summarize his whole career. Victory is not a reward. It's a debt you just agreed to pay. Chapter 7, New in Town. If sweet victory was the celebration, new in town is the hangover. John Kennedy's first months in Washington were a blend of awe, confusion, and comedy. Arriving at the Capitol as a freshman senator, he jokes, is like the first day of high school, except everyone has press coverage. He got lost in the hallways, pressed the wrong elevator buttons, and learned there's an unspoken map for which bathrooms senators actually use. Washington, he says, runs on 3 things: coffee, gossip, and acronyms. Early briefings were a nightmare of paperwork and jargon, thick binders filled with abbreviations no one explained. When he asked what one meant, a staffer smiled and said, "You'll pick it up, Senator." He didn't, not right away. In one budget meeting, Kennedy sat through 2 hours of circular talk that ended with everyone congratulating themselves. I realized Washington speaks its own language, he recalls. It sounds like English, but it's not. So he started building his own glossary. With all due respect meant you're an idiot. Bipartisan cooperation meant prepare to be disappointed. Further study is needed meant this issue is about to die quietly. Instead of letting it make him cynical, he decided to learn the system's rhythm. You can't fight the swamp, he says, if you don't learn how deep it is. Humor became his survival skill, a shield against the absurd. During one committee hearing, after a witness rambled without answering, Kennedy leaned in and said, "Son, I'm not trying to be rude, but if you don't know, just say so. It'll save us both time." The room froze, then laughed. That kind of wit, sharp but good-natured, earned him attention from both sides of the aisle. Some saw him as refreshingly honest, others as dangerously blunt. Kennedy didn't mind. "If speaking plain English sounds like shouting," he said, "that's not my fault." He credits senior senators who quietly guided him through the maze of protocol, the ones who showed him when to fight and when to let things go. Even in politics, he notes, there are still grown-ups left. Over time, he found his rhythm. He learned which fights mattered, how to spot a lie wrapped in polite language, and how to use humor to diffuse tension without cruelty. Washington is full of people who mistake eloquence for wisdom, he writes. I'd rather be clear than clever. At its core, New in Town is about authenticity, Kennedy's refusal to trade plain talk for political polish. If you start pretending, he warns, you'll wake up one day and not recognize yourself. He ends the chapter with quiet confidence. He may not have mastered Washington's games, but he discovered something better, the strength to play his own. Chapter 8. Holding the Line. For Kennedy, holding the line is the hardest part of public service. Not passing laws or giving speeches, but resisting the constant temptation to compromise what you believe for what's convenient. He opens the chapter with a truth few politicians say out loud. Courage isn't a grand speech, it's saying no when everyone wants you to say yes. When he arrived in the Senate, he faced immediate pressure from both parties. Leaders whispered about team unity. Lobbyists talked about mutual benefit. Reporters dangled questions designed to trap him. It was a daily test of character. Kennedy remembers one crucial vote on a bloated spending bill. His own party wanted him to back it. He refused. It wasn't personal. It was principle. It piled debt on taxpayers for things they didn't ask for and couldn't afford, he writes. The backlash came fast. Angry donors, confused colleagues. But the next day, his voicemail filled with messages from regular people saying, "Thank you for doing what's right." That, Kennedy says, was the moment he understood what real representation means. Loyalty to a party should never outweigh loyalty to the people. He describes the Senate as an echo chamber, where words lose meaning and courage hides behind courtesy. You can disagree here, he says, as long as you never mean it. Instead of joining the performance, he developed a defense mechanism: humor. When a reporter asked if he felt lonely voting against his party, he replied, "If you're looking for friends in Washington, buy a dog." The line became famous, not because it was funny, but because it was honest. Holding the line is full of these moral tests. He tells of lobbyists who warned his career would suffer if he didn't vote their way. Kennedy smiled and said, "Careers heal. Countries don't." Through these stories, the chapter paints Kennedy as a man allergic to political blackmail. He admits the price of integrity is high. You lose invitations, influence, even allies, but you keep something more valuable: your own reflection. The hardest battles, he says, are the ones you fight when no one's watching. By the end, his message is simple and uncompromising. Never trade what's right for what's easy. That's how nations and people go broke. Chapter wide. This chapter is Kennedy's bipartisan roast, an equal opportunity takedown of both major parties. His target isn't ideology, it's stupidity disguised as partisanship. Stupidity, he says, isn't Republican or Democrat. It's an American epidemic. He opens with scenes from Senate hearings that sound like comedy sketches. Senators delivering dramatic speeches to empty rooms, aides timing applause for cameras, outrage rehearsed like theater. If either party ever discovered humility, he jokes, they'd patent it and charge admission. Then he gets serious. Kennedy argues that tribal politics has replaced truth. Both sides feed on outrage, he says, because outrage sells. He describes watching senators spend hours arguing over sound bites while ignoring bills that could actually help people. In Washington, he says, some folks would rather win an argument than fix a problem. But even as he skewers both parties, Kennedy refuses to give up on the system. He highlights rare moments of bipartisanship, real cooperation that vanishes the second social media finds out. Every now and then, he writes, you see Democrats and Republicans act like adults. Then Twitter finds out, and it's over. Kennedy's criticism cuts both ways. Liberals for believing compassion requires bureaucracy, conservatives for mistaking loudness for leadership. You can't fix stupid with more partisanship, he says flatly. Still, humor remains his weapon of choice. Two wrongs don't make a right, he concludes, but they'll sure make a headline. His advice to voters is refreshingly direct. Stop treating politics like a team sport. Don't cheer the jersey, judge the play. The chapter ends on a reflective note. Kennedy admits he's made mistakes too, but insists the difference between foolishness and hypocrisy is whether you learn from your falls. The difference between a fool and a hypocrite, he says, is whether you learn after the first fall. Two wrongs leaves readers laughing, then thinking, exactly how Kennedy likes it. Chapter 10. Speed Round. After all the heavy lessons, Kennedy ends the book like a fireworks finale, a burst of one-liners, truths, and hard-earned wisdom. In Washington, he says, the truth is usually the first casualty of convenience. You can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out. If common sense were lard, Washington couldn't grease a pan. Each quip lands like a punchline wrapped around a sermon. Beneath the humor, every line carries a message about integrity, humility, and patriotism. He reminds readers that bureaucracy grows because no one ever gets fired for adding another form. That transparency isn't radical, it's just basic hygiene. And that patriotism isn't blind loyalty, it's accountability. If your idea of leadership is yelling louder, he says, Congratulations, you're a microphone, not a leader. Kennedy's affection for America is undeniable. This country isn't perfect, he says, but it's still the best place on earth to be imperfect. Speed Round feels like a summary of his life philosophy. Be honest, be funny, be brave. Because humor without truth is empty, and truth without humor is unbearable. Epilogue, saying the quiet part out loud. The final section circles back to the book's title and its mission. Testing negative for stupid, Kennedy writes, isn't about IQ. It's about courage, integrity, and refusing to surrender your judgment to anyone. He looks back on his journey, the small-town beginnings, the academic years, the long campaigns, the swampy realities of D.C., and admits he still believes in the American experiment. Yes, the country has noise, political theater, media spin, social media outrage, but he insists truth, spoken plainly, still breaks through the static. In a world that rewards noise, he says, truth spoken softly is still the loudest sound. He closes by thanking his family, his staff, and especially his constituents, the people who keep him honest by asking blunt questions at grocery stores, gas stations, and church doors. The people, he writes, are the last quality control department democracy has left. The epilogue is less a conclusion than a challenge. Kennedy urges readers and listeners to reclaim common sense as a civic virtue. Don't parrot headlines. Don't follow mobs. Think for yourself. Don't be afraid to call out nonsense, he says. Think for yourself, and above all, test negative for stupid. He leaves us with one final reflection, the heartbeat of the entire book. Integrity, humility, humor. They're not just personal virtues, they're the real tests of intelligence.